Welcome to Shout It Out, a Glitter Band podcast hosted by Warren Paul and Andy Chamberlain. Episode 12, Just For You and the Single That Almost Was. Our theme comes courtesy of Glenn Greenwood and John Springate.
And for a sparkling start to Top of the Pops this week, the second hit in a row for the backing band who've stepped out from behind Gary Glitter to make it on their own account. The Glitter Band, Just For You.
That's the voice of Brian Matthew, legendary, and I don't use that term loosely, broadcaster who worked for the BBC for 63 years. Hi Andy, that's not a bad run. Do you think we'll get there?
63 years.
Yeah, how we go, do you think?
With the right drugs and blood transfusions.
And is it cryogenic sort of freezing? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it was a picture of Dorian Gray in the attic, as a certain person used to say.
Yeah. Oh, of course. You know, well, in that case, we might get halfway there. You'd think continuing the Glitter Band story would be easy. First single, Angel Face, leaves the charts. Wait a month or so, and the follow-up appears. Did it happen like that, Andy?
Well, no, not quite. We're picking up in April of 74, which was a month after Angel Face was released in the UK. An extensive Australian-New Zealand tour for July was announced. And here's the interesting bit for Glitter Band fans, and this is quoting from a local music article. The Glitter Band intend to remain in Australia for 2 weeks after Glitter, Mr. Glitter, returns to Britain. Then they will do live concerts, some club work, and appear at discos.
Andy's quoting from the front cover of Go Set, the only Australian music paper at the time. Days and dates can be rather dull, but in this case they're significant. It seems that the original plan was to return to the UK at least a week after Just For You's release. That seems rather odd, Andy. Did something change over the next couple of months?
Well, it appears so, and it has to do with this particular song.
Tell Him was originally scheduled to be the Glitter Band's second single. Its release date was to be early June, the week after Gary's Always Yours. Interesting that it was to be released the week after Gary's single, rather than like Angel Face the week before. Do you think Gary may have done a little lobbying, Andy?
Yeah, I guess so, but I mean, I think management would have been getting into the machine of trying to manage releases from two very well-related acts, you know, under Glitter banner. So, I mean, I would have thought they'd know they've got to be sensible about those releases, trying to capitalise on them both, but at the same time, not letting them interfere with each other. But yeah, he may have done, I'm sure. Band members and stuff would have said that he did.
Bell Records gave Tell Him a catalogue number and a B-side, I'm Celebrating, the same as Just For You. Labels were even printed, though there doesn't seem to be any evidence that records were pressed up. But John Russell and Jerry Shepherd lobbied against the record's release. That's entirely understandable, as Tell Him was a cover version, not an original. There were many acts at the time who employed outside writers for their singles. John and Jerry were determined for the Glitter Band to not do the same, though many years later, John did express his doubts as to whether they made the right decision. This appears to be what might be considered as a rare victory over Mike Lander and Bell, but could there be more to the story, Andy?
Yeah, there is. So basically, at the time of Tell Him's proposed release, there was an industrial unrest at the BBC, and that culminated in Top of the Pops not going to air for a full 7 weeks. And that was the last 2 weeks of June, all of July, and the first week of August. So the last episode that went to air before the strike was on the 13th of June, and that was the second performance of Always Yours. And obviously the first performance of that was something like the 6th of June, the week before. Sorry, that's obvious, isn't it? So that left no opportunity for the Glitter Band to appear on Top of the Pops promoting Tell Him. And assuming that Bell and the Glitter Band's management knew that there was going to be a possibility of the industrial action, the strikes, and considering the length of the likely strikes, there was every reason to cancel the release of Tell Him.
There's a bit in there, Andy. Are you saying that there wasn't time to schedule, say, a couple of Top of the Pops performances for Tell Him, as well as Gary's two Always Yours performances, before what was to become a long strike?
Yeah, undoubtedly so. I think only 2 Top of the Pops were available before the strike. So I would say that Dick Lee and Bell and Mike Leander knew that there was a lengthy strike ahead. It was a strong possibility anyway. So it's highly likely that the single was cancelled just basically because of the industrial unrest. There was, of course, the 10-day UK tour with Gary coming up in mid-June.
Yep.
You'd have thought that would have been an ideal opportunity for the band to promote the new single. But of course, the cancellation of Tell Him gave John Russell and Jerry a bit of time to argue the case for the song Just For You.
Tell Him was recorded during the sessions for the Hey album at Studio Ferber in Paris during the second half of May. After those sessions, the Glitter Band's next commitment was a warm-up gig with Gary in Brussels on the last day of the month. On returning to the UK, there were a couple of weeks before the UK GG tour was to begin. Might have been a good time for a break, as the Glitter Band had toured extensively over the last 5 months. But no, even more gigs were scheduled. Andy, we know of 4.
Yeah. So they were in Staffordshire, Doncaster, Hindley and Dunstable. And there were probably more, of course, as we keep alluding to in our episodes. We find gigs that nobody was expecting to be fitted in.
Right. And Andy, I think this one's a real surprise. I really thought, looking at their schedule, what would have been the last 6, probably from the October tour they did of Australia through to then, they hardly stopped. So I thought that would have been the perfect time for them to at least have a week off, but it didn't happen. Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it is incredible. Yeah.
The day after the Brussels gig, there was a happy occasion. Tony Leonard got married in Lynn. John Russell, Harvey Allison and Jerry Shepherd were in attendance. Andy, I see you've got a local newspaper report in front of you. Someone else was there, but they didn't get to attend the actual wedding.
No. It's an interesting one. Gary was late in leaving London to attend the wedding. And according to the article that we have, on his arrival, where the wedding was taking place, he was held up by fans outside a hotel called the Duke's Head. And he details that he went into a particular shirt and blue sequin suit. And 2 members of the personal security crew who were with him decided it was too risky for him to get out of his Rolls Royce and past the fans and sightseers crowding around the entrance to the church.
Yeah, it would have turned into a circus, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But so it was held. He sat in a small room at the New Village Hall, and he was one of the first guests instead to arrive at the reception. So he missed the actual ceremony.
The UK tour with Gary commenced on June the 15th. They played the Rainbow in London, New Theatre in Oxford, the Southampton Gaumont, the Capitol in Cardiff, King's Hall in Manchester, the Southport Theatre, the Glasgow Apollo, and Newcastle City Hall. Now, at the end of the tour, there were some gigs at the Birmingham and Hammersmith Odeons, but they were cancelled as Gary was suffering from throat problems. I'm sure the Glitter Band didn't mind having a few days off. The tour didn't end in the UK, though, Andy.
No, they were off to Australia and possibly New Zealand. Now, we've got a copy of one of the band members' itineraries. We think it's Jerry's, and it's quite interesting, actually. Timings are very precise for check-in and stuff. The first one doesn't say check-in at London Heathrow on Sunday the 30th at 8 o'clock. It has to be 8:05, which is very, very pedantic, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And then obviously so check-in's 8:05, takeoff is 9:05. It's just funny how it's, to the 5 minute past the 8. They arrive in Athens on the Monday, the 1st of July at 1:30 in the morning.
Then they go to a hotel, but their next flight, they're checking in at 5:30. So they've got 4 hours to check into a hotel, try and sleep, then get up and go back to the airport. You wouldn't know where you are, would you?
It's awful, yeah.
Then they're off to Sydney. And on that flight, which would have been the long flight, obviously, they saw 2 films, Andy. What were they?
A film called Super Cops, which I don't know, and another one called Lost Horizon.
Do you know Lost Horizon?
It's one of those things that, it rings a bell, but I can't specifically identify it. It's probably a load of rubbish.
Both those names ring a bell, but I've never seen them.
Right.
So they arrive in Sydney, and then I don't believe this. They actually the day after. So they're in Sydney. So the day after, they go from Sydney to Brisbane, and so we're in Brisbane, and they've got a gig or 2 in Brisbane. Then they go back to Sydney, and then I think they had a gig, which is on a Friday. On that Saturday, I think they had a gig. Then they go to Melbourne, and they're in Melbourne. They had 4 gigs in Melbourne because I was there, one of them. Then they go off to Adelaide. So they're in Adelaide. And they go from Adelaide to Perth, which is the last show. And that was a large outdoor show. And then they have to go back to Sydney to fly back to Athens to back to London. Now, a couple of things. That tour, the amount of flights, there's one leg where they go from Brisbane, I should say, to Sydney to get to Melbourne. Now, I would say there'd be at least half a dozen flights, probably more, but direct flights between Brisbane and Melbourne per day. But back then, they had to do it in hops. And the other thing is, and I'm sure there are people in the UK who know this, is that you can fly easily, directly from the UK to Perth. So they couldn't do that. So they had to go back to Sydney and back to the UK. And this is the classic, I reckon, Andy. On Wednesday the 24th, that was when they arrived in Athens on the way back home. And they landed in London, which would have been the same day. So that's Wednesday the 24th of July. 2 days later, Just For You was released.
Wow.
It didn't stop, did it?
No, it's just relentless.
Now, I just mentioned that I was at one of the gigs on that tour, and I have a question that hopefully someone can answer. In a recent podcast, we played a recording of Angel Face from a Sydney show on that tour. I saw the 3rd 4 Melbourne concerts the next week. The structure of the show had changed. The Sydney show opened with Hello, Hello, I'm Back Again, while in Melbourne it had changed to I Didn't Know I Loved You Till I Saw You Rock and Roll. There was another change. The Glitter Band performed an additional song to Angel Face. Now, I didn't recognise the song, So I assume it was You Wouldn't Leave Me, Would You? But I'd love to know if anyone attended a show on that tour and can remember the song. This is good. Andy, I see you have a promotional article from a TV show in front of you featuring a Glitter Band member. What's the name of the show and who's the member?
Well, this will be familiar to everybody, but not for us. It's called Blind Date, but obviously it's not the UK version. It's the Australian production of Blind Date, which I gathered was quite different.
It would have been cheaper, would be the main difference. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll just be honest.
So it's the cheap date.
Yeah, cheap date. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, the photo features John Russell, who appeared on the show while there in Melbourne, alongside Robin Nedwell of the Doctor in the House series.
I remember
TV
that.
series.
I do remember that. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Oh, you had it as well, did you?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had. I think there's about half a dozen, and it was a doctor. I think it just kept going. It seemed to keep going on forever.
All of our superior TV.
No, that was a huge show here. I think quite a lot of the actors, apart from Robin Nedwell, ended up coming out here doing theatre, stage shows.
All right.
And there may have been a doctor in Australia, but I wouldn't put any money on that. But I think it's more likely.
Wouldn't have been as sophisticated as ours, would it?
Well, I hate to bring this up again. Yeah, I know what you're saying, Andy. It would have. Can I put it this way? It would have been even cheaper. How does that sound?
Gosh.
Now we even have the date that JR was appearing, don't we? So
yeah.
Well, I think we do. It was 74. We're having a look at this again. He was
23rd.
Is today's date? No, he was on the 8th. I
23rd.
think he was on the 18th. I think Rob Nebb was on the next week. So obviously, they would have recorded 5 shows in a day.
Oh,
sure.
see, yeah.
Yeah, and the picture's worth a look. And we keep saying this, and we keep failing, but we will ensure this picture appears on an assortment of Glitterband and related sites.
Yeah,
It's a classic. Hey, look, it's blown up. It's really grainy, but I think it's a first.
Yeah.
And it's funny. Oh, look, the other bit about that is, unfortunately, the sub-editor got JR's name wrong, which was par for the course. But
oh, yeah.
rather than usual Russell, you see that everywhere, and there was also a Ruffle, which appeared on some singles. They've somehow come up with Nossel. And what do you think of this, Andy? My theory is a Blackpool Australian accent miscommunication. What do you think of that?
Yeah, because I guess
How can you come up with Nossel? Or Nossel? But it's obvious that isn't a name. Anyway, the photo will go up on Facebook. And Andy, did JR organise something else Glitterband related while they were in Australia?
Yeah, sorry, it's still getting over that. Yes, so they did some recording there, apparently. So in Sydney, they put some tracks down on tape at a studio called Earth Media. And this was between concerts in Melbourne. And they were, it says Armstrong Studios to put some backing tracks on the tapes.
Yeah, and the journos got that the wrong way around, haven't they?
Yeah.
Because you'd be doing the backing tracks first, wouldn't you?
Bit weird. And the plan was then to take tapes back to Britain and include them on an album later in the year.
Which was never going to happen because Mike wasn't there. So they were demos.
Yeah.
And we talk about them in an upcoming episode.
Yes, we do, yeah.
Before we finish with this tour, there are a couple of things worth mentioning. The tour was originally scheduled to include New Zealand. It doesn't appear on the itinerary, though there seems to be a few days in the middle where they could have gone over to New Zealand and performed some gigs. We haven't been able to find anything to confirm this, but there is someone in New Zealand who will know. Rob, can you fill us in?
Yeah. Right back at the beginning of this podcast, we mentioned that Glitterband were due to stay on in Australia for a couple of weeks and do a few club dates and some promotion. Now, that didn't happen as they had to return home because Just For You was just about to be released.
Andy, do you think it's reasonable to assume that when the original schedule for the Australian tour was issued, It had been put together under the assumption that the follow-up to Angel Face, namely Tell Him, had been released in the UK and then completed all promotional commitments, including Top of the Pops, before they left for Australia. That would explain why they were originally scheduled to spend a couple more weeks in that country before returning home. That's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm convinced that's correct, for sure.
Now, we have a few reviews. The first one is from the Liverpool Echo, which is, predictably, the Glitter Band are still stomping out the repetitive riffs in the hope of success with their new single, Just For You. Isn't it about time for a change of sound, lads? Well, that reviewer wasn't interested, but considering like the majority weren't in the know, they thought the Glitter Band played on Gary's records. I suppose it's understandable. Andy, another publication made Just For You its pick of the week.
Yeah, so this is Record Mirror, and it says, this sparkling band have proved they can make it without the gaffer, and now they're going to show us their no one-hit wonders. Listen to that sax intro. Okay.
Sax?
And the drums studding away.
Was there some guitar there as well? Do you think?
Well, yes, guitar with sax. Anyway, the glitter sound is unmistakable. Two of the band wrote this little number, although with Gary's co-producer Mike Leander doing the production. And it's obvious who's influencing who. Bands shortly go on tour, so there's more promotion, which leaves me to say that a top 10 hit, it'll be a top 10 hit. Sorry, there's a little bit of text missing to write this. And then the question, will they split from the boss? Well, it makes you wonder. But it does say it's a chart cert, so that's positive.
Though Just For You reached the top 10, it was in and out of the top 30 fairly quickly, so there were only two, but consecutive, Top of the Pops appearances. Both are different to the standard Top of the Pops performances. Let's start with the first one, Andy.
Okay, so if you're searching for on YouTube, which basically everybody searches now, this is the performance that begins with some typical 1970s visual effects. The host for this YouTube channel is Mr. Haggis64. So it's obviously a Scottish guy who was born in 1964, maybe.
Not a bad guess.
Some generalising.
I think that's right, though. Yeah.
I wonder if I can guess his password.
I think you have.
We've seen the complete episode, and the Glitter Band is the only studio act not to perform in front of an audience. So it does seem that this was a pre-recorded session before the rest of the show was recorded. It's
a bit of a puzzle. They've been back in the country for about a week and weren't on tour. Why weren't they in the BBC studios for that show's recording? The only possibility I can come up with is that the performance was pre-recorded before their Australian tour. I wouldn't be surprised if the Glitter Band, particularly John Russell, put up a fight to stay in that country as originally scheduled for a couple of weeks and pre-recorded the initial Top of the Pops to cover for their absence. Maybe management won and ordered them back to the UK. Now, that's just a theory. Can you think of another reason, Andy?
I mean, I thought they might have had a holiday or something. I mean,
yeah, that's possible.
Whether they were doing some promotion in Europe, maybe, I don't know. You've got a theory, haven't you, that's probably technically based on this?
Yeah, well, if you're in the studio while that clip was being shot, you wouldn't have seen all that sort of stuff in the background, the colourful effects. You would have seen the Glitter Band standing in front of a green screen. Mm-hmm. The problem with putting in an audience, well, for a start, none of them could wear green because it would disappear. The problem with bringing an audience in is you can guarantee someone in the audience would have had on a green top. So if you had on a green top, you would have disappeared as well. So, the other thing is the cameras would have been quite static. So in the 70s and through to the 80s and probably the 90s, logistically, you really couldn't shoot something of that nature with an audience. So that may have been the reason. So I guess we've come up with three, Andy, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, they could have been in France, Paris recording.
Yeah, but I just
we don't know. We'll have to ask.
Yeah, we'll have to look. All of ours could be
if
wrong.
I remember,
couldn't they? We could. It could be. It certainly could be. There could be a fourth one. Anyway, A week later, the Glitter Band were back on Top of the Pops. This time they're in the studio with the rest of the acts, but it doesn't seem to be the normal Top of the Pops studio. The audience is separated from the performers. You can also find this clip on YouTube. Its host channel is RGM304. That's not as good as Mr. Haggis, is it?
No, very lacking in
isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Not as good as Mr. Haggis, and nowhere near as good as Glitter Bandits. The clip begins with the Glitter Band behind a curtain. This does seem to be a special episode, Andy.
Yeah, using a different studio, as you say, I think it is a special. It's part of a Summer of Osmond specials produced by the BBC. So, in an earlier podcast, we chatted about when John Russell was guest singles reviewer for Record Mirror a few weeks after this episode of Top of Pops went to air. He was very complimentary of the Osmonds, enjoyed being part of this particular show.
The BBC obviously decided it was not a good idea having the audience too close to the Osmonds, so they're in a separate seating block. A few months earlier, a young girl tragically died at a David Cassidy concert. I think that may have influenced their decision.
Yeah. So, yeah, you see standard studio seating block, don't you?
Yeah, and they're keeping the kids away from the Osmonds.
Now, the only other Just For You TV performance that we're aware of was on the programme Lift Off with Aisha, which aired just a few days before the second Top of the Pops appearance. Now, we have quite a few cover versions of the Just For You song, actually. Not as many as Angel Face, and arguably not as good as some of the Angel Face ones. We're going to play the first one for you now.
Just for you, just for you, just for you, just for you. Every little thing I do, you know I do it just for you. I've got no money, no place to live, but all I've got, you know I'd give. I was thinking of you.
That's the Soda Pop Show. I don't know anything about the Soda Pop Show. I can't remember where I got the track from, and it does seem to have vanished from the internet. Andy, is that necessarily a bad thing?
Sorry if the person's listening, but it's
Not good.
It's not good. It's it's of a style maybe that somebody might. Oh no, but it's sounds like a MIDI file. Great in my opinion, anyways. Let alone that recorded version of it.
Let's move on to the next one.
Now this one's a bit of a mystery. You will find it on YouTube, so I would suggest typing in Glitter Band, Just For You, heavy metal cover.
I like this version of Just For You. Whoever came up with heavy metal cover for the X title couldn't be accused of false advertising, could they, Eddie?
No. Yeah, we could have a bit of lyric vocals on it or something, but
You've got the guitar seems to be playing the melody, doesn't it? Which is interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting somebody chose to do that.
Yeah, it surprised me as well. That's another one I like. With the name Cyanide Pills, that's just what I'd expect. What do you think of the song? And will we hear more of the Cyanide Pills later in this podcast, Andy?
Yeah, certainly another one to come from Cyanide Pills. What do I think of it? Yeah, it's post-punk or third wave of punk. Yeah, it's got life to it. It's a full song, unlike, the two previous versions that are just a bit lacking. It's got a lot of energy to it. Works quite well, I'd say, actually.
And they've put, as you said...
Better than the original.
I'm
really hard on that song, I know.
Look, I think it's different to the original, but I'd agree that maybe the original, the tempo, it would have been better if maybe the tempo was a tad faster. Do you think?
Yeah. There's bits in the song Just For You that I struggle with. I think I've gone on record on the previous podcast about it. It's no point just going over it again, really. That moves, really, and I think it works better that way. Not to everybody's taste, I'm sure, but...
There is a version of Just For You by the Glitter Band, recorded in the studio, that we're going to play at the end of this podcast, which is similar to what you've heard before, which we'll explain at the end. I prefer that to the release version.
Right, yeah.
As often happens with follow-ups to first hits, Just For You did not sell as well as Angel Face. On the official UK Top 30, which I've just discovered, was titled the British Market Research Bureau Music Chart. Did you know that, Andy?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The MRB.
Well, okay. Well, I didn't know that, but I do now. And we have mentioned earlier that Just For You reached number 10. Andy, you've got a couple more UK charts in front of you. One is from, I think, the Lynn Advertiser.
Okay, so the Lynn Advertiser has Just For You as their tip for the top. And that's really encouraging. Obviously, it didn't get to the top, actually. But the Stapleford and Sandaker News have a chart which came from C. Gilbert Limited, which we will assume is a local music shop. And it does appear there are quite a few Glitter Band fans in the Nottingham, Derby area. They've got in this chart Just For You listed at number 8.
So we're going upwards, aren't we?
Yeah.
In a previous episode, we spoke about how Angel Face reached number 1 on the Radio Luxembourg chart. Just For You didn't do quite as well, but it did peak at number 5, a substantially higher placing than on the UK BMRB chart.
So we do have some international chart entry information. One is in Germany, where Just For You peaked at number 35, and the other is Finland, where the song reached number 24.
And there's one more, sort of. The Melbourne radio station that did the Top 40 music chart used to put out a midweek list, which included 5 tracks that were hit-bound, so sort of bubbling under. I remember seeing Just For You appearing in that chart once, but never to be seen again. As someone whose ear was never far from a radio during evenings at that time, what was unusual is that I never heard Just For You on the radio. Almost all of the hit-bound tracks ended up in the chart. Just For You must have gone very, very, very close to getting airplay. Let's have a listen to its B-side.
Now that was the Pete Phipps composed song I'm Celebrating, and if I recall correctly, in one of our Hey podcasts, you said, Warren, that you felt it deserved a more prominent spot on the album.
Yeah, I did, Andy. I would have moved it up the batting order to track 9 from track 11. I reckon the album overall works better that way. We have a couple of cover versions. This one might sound a little familiar.
I'm
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if anybody's heard that before that's listening, but yeah, I'm not sure about the haze, but that bounces along quite nicely as well. I mean, obviously there aren't many cover versions of the song, but yeah, it's quite nice to hear that. What do you think, Warren?
Well, yeah, I like it, Andy. What's interesting, and I guess we should explain to the listeners, that is the B-side of the Cyanide Pills cover of Just For You. So we've got Just For You on one side, and we've got I'm Celebrating on the other side. And I think you can probably still buy that single. I think it was vinyl only. You've seen that single, haven't you?
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned in the Hey podcast that I'm Celebrating doesn't seem to have a chorus. I quite like how Cyanide Pills have moved the parts around, although I think I still prefer the structure of the original. Andy, the next one is Unreleased, but our regular listeners will be familiar with the performer.
I'm celebrating, I'm tired of waiting. I'm celebrating tonight, but you didn't come by, so I just sit here and cry. 'Cause I wasn't sure that you would knock on my door. I need your love, girl. It's not enough.
So that is actually a fan who's recorded that. His name is Richard Kenner, and he been in a few bands. And one of the things that people probably will remember him being involved in is a band called Raised on Radio. And
Did they support the Glitter Band at one stage?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah. So some opportunities to perform with Springy and the band, as support for the band. Yeah, so I want to thank Richard for sharing that with us. It was going to, well, it will probably be put out when I do some more of the cover versions en masse and start releasing those. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Richard. And obviously people will know Richard's name and voice from the Hey podcast that we did with him and a couple of other fans recently.
If you're preparing a podcast for the Glitter Band, you would not think that you'd find two cover versions of I'm Celebrating, would you? So that's great that we have two.
No, it's good. It's really good to be able to include those. Yeah, good.
Here's a song you may have never heard before.
Remember last summer, down at the fair, skipped up our lesson just to go there, playing on record, all scratched and worn. We huddled together just to keep warm. The lights were flashing, the wind was lashing on the roller coaster going down. Gonna meet you at the fair. Someone's here, throw out your cares. Gonna go on the steering wheel and fly in the sky.
That was, though it's unfinished, our first unreleased Glitter Band recording. There are many, many to go. We've played a few early demo recordings, but they were never intended to be released. And those early demo recordings were the songs that were recorded before Angel Face. It seems that with this track, Gonna Meet You at the Fair, the intention was for it to be released, but it was abandoned before completion. Do you reckon that's right, Andy?
Yeah, I think so.
What would you have added to that song to finish it? Obviously, there would have been
Well, obviously you'd thicken the guitar out a bit.
a bit of brass.
I probably wouldn't put brass in it, no,
But do
personally.
you, but do you
But
think
it
there
would have happened. That's what would have
happened,
gone in. Yeah.
And what about the vocals?
Yeah, retract the vocals. just you could decide whether you're going to make it more of a chorusy ensemble chorus
Chanty type thing, or just Jerry and Springy maybe.
Yeah, Jerry and Springy maybe. Yeah, it's a nice enough song. Put B-side material or something.
Yeah, but it didn't quite make it, did it?
No, it didn't. No, well, we didn't come to anybody's notice for a good 20 odd years.
Yeah, indeed. The reason we are playing Going to Meet You at the Fair is that the song's publishing date is the same as Just For You's, the 1st of June 1974. It was written by Jerry Shepherd and was probably intended to be the B-side for Just For You. Now, we have no evidence, but I think that's highly likely. Instead, the decision was made to go with the same B-side as allocated to the cancelled Tell Him, I'm Celebrating. We'll be playing a lot of unreleased songs in the next few episodes, many which we'd argue are better than this one. Would you agree with that, Andy? I mean, the song's okay, but there are better unreleased songs, aren't there?
Oh, yeah.
The Glitter Band are unique. No one amongst their peers have anything like the same amount of unreleased studio recordings. Considering they spent so much time in the studio, touring, TV appearance and other promotion, it's surprising the Glitter Band found time to watch television, but they did. Is that the worst segue ever, Andy, by the way? Pretty bad, isn't it?
Not necessarily, no.
But it's not the best, is it? Now, I remember reading this article years ago, but have been able to find it until it appeared on Facebook recently. A big thank you to the always positive Facebook regular Solveig Schroeder, who posted the article just before we recorded this podcast. Annie, would you like to start? And I think with Pete Phipps.
Now, Pete has got for his TV favourites Mission Impossible, which I'd concur with him on. He also liked at that time to watch Sky at Night with Patrick Moore. People of a certain generation remember Patrick Moore. And he said there should be more pop programmes on. And ITV haven't got one really to compare to Top of the Pops. He also says that pop programmes in the UK were much better than he's seen in other countries.
I agree with that. Let's go on to John Russell. And JR liked American detective series like Kojak and Cannon, not keen on the soaps such as Coronation Street and Crossroads. He says some interesting about adverts I should say, where there are more breaks in the UK than in Germany, and JR would know that because he spent a lot of time in Germany. And however, he does say he prefers TV in the UK all around. And there's an interesting bit at the end of this, Andy. He says his first TV appearance was on the continent in Germany when he was obviously part of the Bostons back in 1967, and the program was called Music for Young People. What did Springy have to say?
His favourite at the time was Planet of the Apes. He said they'd managed to recreate it really well from the original film. And his favourite person on TV is Annie Walker in Coronation Street, diametrically in opposition to John.
Yeah, you wouldn't have them in the same room watching TV together, would you? Looking at their different tastes.
No.
Harvey says that he's not really a big TV addict. He finds it reduces his drinking time. He says the Bieber the lead when it comes to programs, and he says what's interesting is he really likes Sesame Street. And when we were in Australia, which it appears was a week or two before they did this interview, he used to watch it every day. He can't think of any shows that he hates, and he finds that if I'm only half interested in what I'm on, he'll switch it off pretty quickly, and he'll read a newspaper. On to Jerry.
A lot of people will know that Jerry likes Star Trek. It says that's his favourite, and not the cartoon series, but the real life one. He liked the way they all fall down when the ship gets hit, and they use the same piece of film for it every week. He didn't mind the golden shot of Mission Impossible. Didn't think that the people who appeared on Stars on Sunday could really be called stars. Now we haven't. I'm assuming we're praising all this. A couple of people mentioned this, but we'll just say the same thing here. When it comes to watching himself on TV, Jerry says he tended to get embarrassed, and he didn't know why. But he said the novelty hasn't worn off, and he still finds he wants to rush home and watch himself on TV. if he knows he's going to appear. But obviously he didn't like going through that, like many people don't like watching themselves on TV or video.
That's definitely the case. Even there are even some actors in long-running soaps who never watch themselves because they become so self-critical.
Yeah.
Probably, maybe it's like a band member watching back their own performance, Andy. It's probably the same thing in many cases. And last one's Tony. And Tony likes comedy. So he's got Morecambe and Wise, Monty Python. Some others still have him. He says he watches more BBC than ITV because he prefers the comedy. And he says the worst program on TV is Panorama. Is that still running?
Yeah.
Okay. And I could tell you a story about that. Was that there were some girls who decided to visit Jerry's house one night in the mid-70s unannounced. And they couldn't remember which show it was, but he said, I can only speak to a few minutes because I'm off to watch, and it was either Panorama or Horizon. Is Horizon the science show?
I think so,
Horizon?
yeah.
And is that still running?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I haven't
so it sounds
seen
like
it.
Jerry had quite different taste to Tony. We'll finish off with Tony. So he doesn't like Panorama. Of course, everyone he knows switches it off. That's not good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he says he doesn't watch much TV, but the last bit's quite funny. My younger brother used to sit up close to the set and watch a lot of TV, and now he's got terrible eyes. Well, that used to be a big thing. I think my mum used to say that. Did your mum say that to you?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We'll finish with a couple of live tracks. And for train spotters such as us, a different mix of Just For You. John Springate quite a few years ago mentioned that Just For You is not his favourite Glitter Band song, but you'd never know it from this track, recorded at the Scala in London about 15 years ago.
This is our second hit. It's a follow-up to Angel Face. It's in B flat and it's called Just For You. Just for you, just for you, just for you, just for you. Every little thing I do, you know I do it just for you. I know that I ain't made it yet, but I'll do all I got to get. I will sing it all when I wrote this song. Well, that I have found you, please tell me where you belong. Just for you, had to keep it, had to save it, had to give it to you. Just for you, just for you, had to keep it, had to save it, had to give it to you. Just for you.
A few years before, the Glitter Band supported Gary Glitter on his final tour. Those performances of Just For You may have been the only time the Glitter Band have performed the song since 1974. They include this one.
So on that tour with GG, it was quite surprising to hear that track being played, actually. I suppose it made sense for the audience to have that included. But yeah, obviously, I don't remember whether the lineup of Brian Jones played sax on that, by the way, of Brian Jones, Tony Leonard, Jerry, John, and Eddie Spence ever played that in like 81 to 83, 84, before Pete came back into their lives. I don't remember. I've got a vague recollection they did, but I think I'm wrong. But anyway, my point is that, so in 1997, it was quite surprising that song made its way into that little set that they did before the GG show.
Well, hopefully one of our listeners, Andy, who may have been, I think the Glitter Band started playing together again in mid-82, so hopefully there might be someone who, I mean, but you were seeing
It's
them
hard to remember, you know.
weren't
It's
you
just
seeing, I think you were seeing them at that time, weren't you?
Yeah, but your mind plays tricks on you, and unless somebody, there's people who wrote down the set list, or people who've got really sharp memories.
Yeah, such as Joe, for example.
Yeah, somebody will remember. I just have this nagging recollection, but I'm probably wrong. Anyway, as it's been said by Jerry and stuff, it takes a lot of commitment to play and sing that song, energy and stuff, and I wouldn't want to play it really, if I'm honest.
It divides people a bit, but there are quite a few fans who list that as their favourite Glitter Band song.
Yeah, I don't get it, but each to their own.
Oh, and I said before, when that album came out, I first heard the album, that song, more so than Angel Face, all right, I knew Angel Face, I heard it from the radio a lot, but that was the song that stood out for me, and I just loved it when it came out. Then I wasn't so keen for a while, but this is a pretty silly segue, but having listened to the song we're about to finish with now, I've become pretty keen on it again. And that song is a supposedly re-recorded version of Just For You that, under the Musicians' Union rules, was used for TV appearances. The acts would be booked into a studio and given a maximum 3-hour session to re-record their song. Harvey Allison mentioned that there used to be a bit of tape swapping going on. In this case, he was right. What you're going to hear is the original Just For You recording, but with a lot of the production enhancements or the gloss stripped off. It's not a re-recording. Now, I like this mix. I'll be brave and say if you listen to what we're about to play a couple of times, you may find it a challenge to listen to the release version again. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I think, that's a good point you've made, really. I think it's good to listen to this, actually, to do the comparison.